5 days, one president, zero respect. Deep inside Abidjan's glittering five-star oasis, President Ibrahim Traoré walked in alone. No motorcade, no royal handshake, only to be laughed at, rejected, and shamed for the color of his skin and the dust on his shoes. They saw a nobody, not a nation's leader. Yet while their mockery echoed through marble halls, a quiet resolve was already taking shape. In just 5 days, the man they threw out would return, not seeking revenge, but rewriting the rules of dignity itself. And when power finally spoke, it would sound nothing like anger. It would whisper a question that still haunts every gilded lobby. Would you treat a stranger differently if you didn't know who they were? Disclaimer: this dramatized narrative is a work of fiction inspired by real struggles against prejudice and abuse of power. The names and events are imagined, but the feelings of injustice, hope, and the call to choose kindness over judgment are profoundly real. Stay with us, because what happens next may change the way you greet every face that crosses your path. The sun was melting into the horizon, casting Abidjan in warm hues of amber and rose. Long shadows stretched across the busy boulevards, where car horns mixed with the rhythmic chatter of vendors closing for the day. Streetlights flickered to life one by one, their glow still no match for the dying brilliance of the sky. A yellow taxi pulled up beside a modest sidewalk just outside Plateau District. Its brakes let out a soft squeal. The back door opened. A man stepped out first, tall, calm, his skin catching the last golden light. He wore a simple brown linen shirt tucked into dark slacks. His shoes, scuffed at the edges, bore the marks of travel. There was no flash of security detail, no waiting entourage, no one rushing to open his door. He moved slowly, deliberately, as if savoring the stillness. Behind him, a woman emerged, graceful, poised, her dress gently swaying in the breeze. She reached for the small suitcase he was already pulling from the trunk. He smiled and took it for her. They looked like any other weary couple stepping into a new city for a weekend away. And that was exactly what they wanted to appear. But they weren't ordinary. He was Ibrahim Traoré, president of Burkina Faso, leader of millions, commander-in-chief, and one of the most watched political figures in West Africa. And beside him was the First Lady, his wife of 12 years, known for her quiet strength and calm grace. But tonight, they were simply two travelers hoping to disappear, even just for a little while. He had left his medals and military uniform behind. No flags, no suits, no protocol. Only one goal: to spend 3 days away from decisions, speeches, and scrutiny. Not as a president, just as a man. They had chosen Abidjan for a reason. It was close, modern, and anonymous enough for two people used to being constantly seen. He'd booked nothing in advance. By design. He wanted to test something, or perhaps confirm something. As they walked down the sidewalk, their suitcases gently rolling behind them, the air was filled with scents of roasted peanuts, ocean salt, and faint perfume from nearby cafes. Life in the city was slowing down, but something in Ibrahim's gaze stayed alert. "Are you sure about this?" his wife asked softly, her eyes scanning the boulevard ahead. "Yes," he replied without hesitation. "I want to see how the world treats a man with no name." His voice was calm but layered, as if he was inviting the world to pass a test it didn't know it was taking. They reached an intersection and paused. There it stood before them, the Gold Crest Hotel, one of the most exclusive five-star hotels in Côte d'Ivoire. Towering above the street with glass-paneled walls and golden lettering that shimmered like fire in the sunset, the building radiated power, wealth, and something colder: elitism. It was the kind of place where CEOs were whisked in through back entrances, where foreign dignitaries held secret meetings behind closed penthouse doors. The kind of place where luxury wasn't advertised. It was assumed, and where appearance spoke louder than any name. Ibrahim looked up at the towering letters. His wife glanced at him again. "We could go somewhere simpler," she said, almost suggesting, almost warning. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he smiled faintly, a spark dancing behind his eyes. "No," he said, "let's see who they think we are." There was something quietly daring in his tone, not confrontational, but deeply human. like a man setting down a mirror in front of the world and saying, "Look closely." As they stepped toward the hotel doors, the camera could almost slow, framing the glass, the suitcases, the worn heels on his shoes, the contrast between opulence and humility. A bellboy inside glanced toward them, eyebrow twitching. The doorman shifted, adjusting his posture. And just as Ibrahim reached for the door handle himself, no one opened it for him. There was a flicker of tension in the air, a tension not yet spoken, but already alive. What would happen when power walked in quietly, and no one knew it was watching? Let's continue this journey, because what happened next would shake the foundations of pride, status, and what it truly means to see someone. As Ibrahim and his wife stepped through the revolving glass doors of the Goldcrest Hotel, the air inside shifted, cooler, sharper, perfumed with a delicate blend of jasmine, sandalwood, and something else less tangible: exclusivity. The lobby stretched out like a grand ballroom, its marble floors reflecting chandeliers the size of small cars, each crystal catching the light like a suspended constellation. Ornate pillars gleamed gold in the glow of wall sconces, and behind the concierge desk stood a wall-length mirror framed in carved ivory, silently reminding guests of their appearance before they ever spoke a word. But for all its splendor, there was something colder beneath the surface. Ibrahim and his wife moved forward with quiet confidence, rolling their modest suitcases behind them, the sound of their wheels whispering over the polished marble. Around them, sharply dressed guests lounged on velvet armchairs, sipping cocktails the color of molten rubies, their laughter soft but deliberate, designed to be heard. The couple stood out, not because they demanded attention, but because they didn't. No designer luggage, no tailored suits, no name-brand jewelry, just simplicity, earth tones, worn shoes, the kind of appearance that doesn't whisper status, but story. The first pair of eyes met theirs, an older doorman in a navy coat trimmed with brass buttons. His smile twitched, not in welcome, but in confusion. He glanced at the bellboy standing nearby, then tilted his chin subtly toward the couple. A second later, the bellboy leaned in, his voice barely audible. "They look lost," the doorman smirked, "or in the wrong place." Just a few feet away, a woman in a shimmering red gown gave them a once-over, then turned to her companion with a barely hidden chuckle. They must have taken a wrong turn from the street market. Ibrahim caught none of it, or perhaps he caught all of it, and simply chose silence. His face remained neutral, serene, unreadable. His wife, too, walked with gentle poise, her chin slightly lifted as if to resist the invisible weight of judgment in the room. At the front desk stood a young receptionist, her posture perfect, her blazer pristine. She tapped lightly on her tablet as they approached, her eyes flickering upward without moving her head. The glance was quick, 1 second to scan their clothes, their skin, their lack of polish. Her smile, when it came, was thin and mechanical. "Good evening," Ibrahim said warmly, his voice measured and soft. "We'd like a room for 2 nights." The receptionist blinked slowly. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," he replied. "We just arrived in town." She paused. Her eyes drifted down to their suitcases, taking note of the scuffed corners, the faded tags. A breath passed, then another. "We're fully booked," she said flatly. "Even a small room?" Ibrahim asked politely. "We don't need anything fancy." "We don't have anything for you," she said more firmly now, her tone clipped. "This is a luxury hotel. You might want to try somewhere, more within your range." He didn't flinch. Neither did his wife. But something shifted in the air, something tight and quiet, like the first vibration of a cracked string. From behind the counter, a man appeared, tall, smooth, commanding in a dark gray suit that shimmered under the chandelier. The manager. "Is there a problem?" he asked. "They want a room," the receptionist said, almost with a sigh. The manager gave them one quick look, up, down, and back again. He smiled, but not kindly. "I'm afraid we don't have space for walk-ins tonight," he said, "and we do maintain a certain standard of presentation." The word hung in the air like perfume that turned sour. "You could be the president of the world," he added, chuckling, And that still wouldn't change the fact that you're not staying here. A ripple of laughter from nearby staff broke the lobby's polished silence. Someone near the lounge murmured, "People really think they belong anywhere." Ibrahim stood still. His gaze met the manager's with quiet intensity. Not anger, not surprise, only observation. Then he nodded once, gently took his wife's hand, and turned toward the door. The room returned to its glitter and gossip, but the mirror on the wall remained, and it had seen everything. Something had just cracked. No one noticed it yet, but they would. Ibrahim stood quietly at the front desk, his posture relaxed, yet dignified. Beside him, his wife remained still, her fingers gently resting on the handle of her suitcase. The polished luxury of the lobby shimmered around them. Crystal lighting, marble floors, velvet seating, and yet they stood there as if invisible, draped not in fabric, but in judgment. "We'd like a room, please. Just for 2 nights, Ibrahim repeated, his voice calm and composed. The receptionist didn't even pretend to look at the screen. She blinked slowly, her lips tightening. "Sir, as I mentioned, we're fully booked." "Even a small room?" he asked again, still polite, without a hint of irritation. "Something modest would be more than enough." The young woman's tone sharpened. "There's nothing available. And to be completely transparent, this is a high-end establishment. Our clientele generally book ahead." Ibrahim nodded, considering her words carefully. His eyes briefly scanned the lobby, multiple staff standing around, a bellboy leaning against the elevator, even a cleaner visible near the hallway, none of them appearing particularly busy. The place didn't feel full. It felt filtered. The receptionist glanced to her right just as a tall man emerged from a back corridor. His steps were crisp, shoes gleaming like polished obsidian. The fabric of his suit shifted like liquid metal under the chandelier. He looked at Ibrahim and his wife with a practiced gaze, one that measured people the way a jeweler sizes stones, not for weight, but for worth. "Is there an issue here?" he asked smoothly, stepping behind the desk. "They're asking for a room," the receptionist replied, not bothering to hide her disapproval. The manager turned to the couple and gave a tight smile, calculated, dismissive. "I'm afraid we're at capacity tonight," he said. "And as you may know, we typically reserve our rooms for guests who align with the Goldcrest's image and expectations." Ibrahim tilted his head slightly. "Image?" he asked, though not sarcastically. "Yes," the man said, smiling wider now. "We cater to a very exclusive clientele. Presentation matters here. We have reputations to uphold, standards to maintain." He let the silence hang. His eyes dropped to the couple's luggage, scuffed, faded. Then to their clothes, neat but unbranded, unremarkable. His verdict was already passed. "Sir," Ibrahim said evenly, "are you sure you know who you're speaking to?" The manager chuckled, a short, dismissive sound. "You could be the president of the world, I still wouldn't let you in." A laugh escaped from a staff member nearby. A whisper followed. "Imagine thinking you can just walk into this place looking like that." Another voice, barely contained. "Maybe they got lost on their way to the bus station." The laughter wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Its venom was in the quiet, sharp, arrogant, certain. Ibrahim said nothing. He didn't argue. He didn't correct them. He only looked at the manager, then at his wife, whose eyes remained calm but visibly pained. Her fingers tightened slightly around his arm, not in fear but solidarity. "Very well," Ibrahim said softly. "Thank you for your time." He turned toward the exit, suitcase rolling gently behind him. His wife followed, their footsteps quiet against the grand floor. The marble didn't echo for them. Behind them, the lobby returned to its usual rhythm. Velvet voices, clinking glasses, soft jazz drifting through the air like perfume. No one chased after them. No one asked their names. No one wondered what they had just lost. The revolving door spun slowly, then stopped. Outside, the sun had vanished completely. The golden dusk of earlier had given way to indigo skies and the first hint of evening wind. The city beyond pulsed with life, unaware that something, someone, had just been refused. And while no one in the hotel sensed it yet, a storm had begun to gather. As the glass doors closed behind them and the laughter inside began to fade, Ibrahim and his wife paused on the front steps of the Goldcrest Hotel. The street outside was alive with the colors and sounds of Abidjan's evening pulse. Cars weaving past, neon signs flickering to life, a group of boys playing football down the block with a makeshift ball of twine. But on that narrow stretch of sidewalk, time slowed. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of reflection, of quiet wounds not yet voiced. Ibrahim's grip on his suitcase handle tightened slightly. His wife exhaled slowly, eyes still holding back the sting of what they had just experienced. Then behind them, the door creaked again. Footsteps, quick but hesitant, echoed softly. "Excuse me, sir." "Madam?" came a voice. Young, female, and unmistakably gentle. They turned. She looked no older than 22. Her dark blue blouse was slightly faded, and her black skirt brushed against her ankles. A thin gold name tag sat crooked on her chest. Tamara. Her hair was tied back neatly, but a few strands had escaped, framing a face that looked both anxious and kind. I'm sorry to bother you," she said quickly, stopping a few feet from them. Her eyes darted briefly toward the glass doors behind her, then back at them. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened in there." They said nothing at first. She looked down, almost regretting her own courage. Then she added softer, "No one should be treated like that. I don't know who you are, and it doesn't matter. You didn't deserve that." Ibrahim exchanged a glance with his wife, who offered the girl a small nod of acknowledgement, an invitation to keep speaking. Tamara took a step closer, lowering her voice as if she were afraid the walls might still be listening. "I'm just a junior assistant," she said. "I don't even have access to the guest list. I don't check people in or decide who gets a room. I mostly run errands, help clean, sometimes take laundry to the back. I don't have any say in how things are done." She paused, fidgeting with her hands. "But I saw how they looked at you, how they dismissed you before you even finished a sentence. And it didn't sit right with me." Ibrahim studied her, not in judgment, but with quiet curiosity. She wasn't performing. There was no benefit for her to say anything. In fact, it was probably risky for her to even be standing there. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low and steady. "Tamara," she replied, her chin rising slightly. "Well, Tamara," he said, "you've just done something most people in this world are too afraid to do." She blinked. "What's that?" "You stood up for someone when you had nothing to gain. No recognition, no reward, just your conscience." Her face flushed slightly and she looked down at her shoes again. I couldn't let you leave thinking everyone here is like that. Some of us still see people." His wife stepped forward, offering her hand. Tamara hesitated, then shook it gently, humbled. "Your kindness means more than you know," she said warmly. Tamara smiled, though her eyes were misting. "I wish I could help more," she said, "but I can't do much. You're not just anything," Ibrahim interrupted. "Tonight, you were everything they weren't." She didn't know how to respond. The compliment landed not with grandiosity, but with quiet weight, something she would carry for a long time. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, then offered a final smile before turning to walk again with his wife. This time there was something lighter in their stride, not because the wound had healed, but because a small act of humanity had offered them relief. As they disappeared into the golden haze of the city, Tamara stood alone outside the hotel, her arms wrapped loosely around herself, watching them go. She didn't know who he was, but somehow she knew she'd see him again, and next time, everything would be different. Tamara stood in silence for a moment after the couple turned to leave again. Something inside her stirred, something deeper than sympathy. It was recognition, not of who they were, but of what they felt. "I know how it feels," she called out suddenly, her voice barely above the hum of traffic. "To be looked at like you don't belong." Ibrahim paused. He turned halfway toward her, not speaking, just listening. Tamara took a breath, as if gathering more than words. "I grew up in Yopougon," she said, stepping closer, voice still soft but steady. "One room, tin roof, water only some days. My mother sold plantains by the roadside. My father left when I was 7. People used to walk past us like we weren't even there. I'd stand behind my mother's stall and watch them, how they'd step around us, how they never met our eyes. She shrugged lightly, a sad smile forming. I learned early that people don't need to say anything cruel. Sometimes just silence is enough to make you feel small. Ibrahim's wife looked at her more closely now, her expression changing, not just compassion, but respect. Tamara continued, eyes glancing back at the hotel. That place back there? It shines. It sparkles. But inside, it's cold. You walk in, and they measure you. Not by your words, not by your kindness, just your clothes, your shoes, the weight of your silence. Her voice caught, but she pushed through it. Every day I stand behind that counter or carry towels down the hall, and I hear them laugh at people who don't look right, people who speak softly, who ask for help, who wear the wrong shoes or carry the wrong bag. They pretend they're welcoming, but it's all a performance. For people like you, or people like me, if we walk in without the right mask, they don't see us. She looked up again, her gaze meeting Ibrahim's fully now. That's not how it's supposed to be. No one should be treated like that. Not anywhere. Not ever. The air around them felt heavier for a moment, charged not with outrage but with quiet truth, a kind of sadness that didn't ask for pity, just acknowledgement. Ibrahim stepped closer, his expression unreadable but focused. You've seen a lot, he said quietly. I've seen enough, she replied. He nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting in something that almost resembled a smile, but not quite, more like a silent promise. What's your name again? He asked. Tamara, she said. He nodded again, slower this time. Tamara, he repeated as if locking it into memory. His wife reached out and gently touched Tamara's arm. You have a good heart, she said. Hold on to it. Tamara could only nod in return. The streetlights above them flickered fully to life now, casting a golden glow on the pavement. Around them the world moved on, cars passing, horns in the distance, the distant rhythm of music from a street bar. But in that pocket of space, something meaningful had passed between them. They said no more. With a final glance, Ibrahim and his wife turned and began walking down the street, their small suitcases humming softly over the sidewalk. They didn't speak to each other, but their silence was no longer empty, and Tamara stood still, watching them disappear into the darkening city, her own heart suddenly a little heavier and strangely full. The streets of Abidjan stretched ahead, bathed now in the indigo hue of evening. Street vendors packed up their stalls, mothers called children in from doorways, and the city's heartbeat slowed to a quieter rhythm. Ibrahim and his wife walked side by side, their suitcases whispering against the uneven pavement. The glamour of Goldcrest was already behind them, but its chill still clung to their skin like a film that wouldn't wash off. They didn't speak, not yet. Words would only make the moment heavier, and the silence between them held its own kind of conversation. The further they moved from that marble-floored insult, the more human the world around them began to feel. A few blocks in, they turned onto a quieter street, less polished, more lived in. A chipped wooden sign hung crookedly over a narrow doorway. La Maison Douce, Chambre Disponible. Soft yellow light poured from the windows, and the smell of grilled plantains and jasmine drifted from a nearby alley. Ibrahim stopped. Shall we? He asked, his voice low, eyes scanning the small building. His wife gave a tired but sincere smile. Yes, I think this place might actually have a soul. They walked up the 2 short steps and into a narrow lobby. The walls were faded peach, and the floor tiles, though cracked in places, had been scrubbed clean. An oscillating fan buzzed from one corner, and a cat lay curled on a welcome mat, completely unbothered by the newcomers. From a small desk emerged a woman in a bright patterned head wrap, her smile instant and genuine. She looked up from a ledger and greeted them in soft, French-accented English. Bonsoir, monsieur, madame. You're looking for a room? Yes, just for 2 nights, Ibrahim replied. You've come to the right place, she said warmly. We may not have chandeliers, but we do have clean sheets, warm tea, and quiet. She led them upstairs to a small room at the end of the hall. It had pale blue walls, a squeaky ceiling fan, and 2 narrow beds pushed together beneath a window. The curtains were thin, the furniture mismatched, but everything was tidy, well-kept, and peaceful. "Make yourselves comfortable," the woman said before closing the door behind her. Ibrahim set down the suitcase and crossed to the window. He parted the curtains and looked out onto the street below. A man was strumming a guitar on a stoop. A girl chased her little brother between lampposts. Someone laughed loudly inside a nearby home, the kind of laugh that came from comfort, not status. His wife came to stand beside him. For a while they just watched. Then almost in a whisper, Ibrahim said, "I'm going to teach them a lesson they'll never forget." She didn't ask who he meant. She already knew. Her eyes searched his face for a trace of vengeance, but found only clarity. "What kind of lesson?" she asked gently. He turned to her, voice still calm but steady. "Not one born of anger. Something better. A reminder that humility is not weakness, that kindness isn't tied to uniforms or gold-trimmed lobbies, and that the way you treat people, especially when you think they are nobody, can come back in ways you never imagined." She reached for his hand and held it. "You're serious," she said. "I've never been more serious." Outside, the city pulsed on. Inside, their room buzzed with stillness. It was quiet, yes, but not empty. It held something the five-star hotel hadn't: warmth, humanity, the echo of laughter from across thin walls, the smell of something simple and good being cooked downstairs, the comfort of being treated with dignity without having to prove your worth first. Ibrahim took one last glance out the window before closing the curtains. He wasn't a man easily provoked, but he was a man who remembered. And tonight, something inside him had shifted. This wasn't just about being turned away. It was about what that moment represented. And what he was going to do next would not just answer an insult, it would make a statement to the world. The room was quiet, lit only by the soft yellow glow of a bedside lamp. Outside the window, the sounds of the city had faded into a low, rhythmic hum. Cars in the distance, a dog barking, the occasional shout from a night vendor echoing through the narrow alleyway. But inside, there was only stillness. Ibrahim sat at the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, phone in hand. His wife rested behind him, lying still, but not asleep. She was watching him in silence, reading the lines of thought etched across his shoulders. The soft creak of the ceiling fan overhead was the only sound in the room. He took a breath, then dialed. It rang once, twice. Then a voice, calm, alert, even at this hour. "Mr. President?" Ibrahim didn't waste time. "Joseph, I need something done. Quietly." There was a pause, then the response came, steady and loyal. "I'm listening. I need to acquire a property, the Goldcrest Hotel in Abidjan. I want full control. Every floor, every door, every contract. I don't want them to know it's me behind the deal. Not yet." Joseph didn't reply right away. He'd been by Ibrahim's side long enough to know when something had shifted. His voice lowered, cautious but respectful. "What happened?" "I'll tell you later," Ibrahim said. "For now, I need discretion. No direct ties to the government. No noise. Use a private intermediary. Preferably someone they'd never suspect. A local businessman, a real estate shell, whatever works." "Understood. Timeline?" 5 days, Ibrahim said firmly. "Not a minute longer." Another silence, this time with a hint of disbelief. "Sir, that's ambitious." "It's necessary. Do you want full staff review as part of the process?" "Yes," Ibrahim replied, standing now, walking slowly toward the window. "I want access to their internal reports, complaints, hiring practices, everything, especially how they treat their junior staff. And after the purchase, that's when we begin the real work," he said. "This isn't just about ownership. It's about rebuilding something rotten from the inside out." His fingers tapped the window frame as he spoke, his mind moving faster than his words. "I don't want the Gold Crest to be another palace for the powerful. I want it to become a place where value is measured by character, not currency. A place that doesn't reward arrogance or punish humility. It needs to be more than a symbol of luxury. It needs to stand for something." On the other end of the line, Joseph said quietly, "That's a tall order." Ibrahim smiled faintly. "You've worked with me long enough to know I only ask for what I believe is possible." There was a pause, then Joseph replied, "Then I'll make it happen." Good, keep my name out of it until the contract is signed. Once the ink is dry, I'll take it from there. I'll send updates daily. Thank you, Joseph. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. His reflection caught briefly in the window. Calm still, but no longer silent. His wife sat up behind him. It's begun, hasn't it? He turned to her. Yes. She tilted her head slightly, studying his face. Is this revenge? No, he said. It's responsibility. If I leave it as it is, that place will keep hurting people who can't fight back. I have the power to change that. Not through anger, but through design, through action. She nodded slowly, not as a sign of permission, but of alignment. What about the girl? She asked. He smiled, genuine this time. Tamara. Yes, she'll be the first to know once it's done. The light flickered gently above them, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. The room was humble, just a bed, a fan, a table. But it had become a war room of sorts. Plans were forming, not with blueprints and maps, but with purpose and quiet fire. Ibrahim returned to his seat at the edge of the bed. His wife rested her head on his shoulder, and together they sat in silence once again. But this silence was different. This one had direction, and the storm that had gathered outside was now under his command. 3 days had passed since the quiet couple walked out of the Goldcrest Hotel, and yet their presence, or more accurately, their absence, still lingered in the air. Not among the managers, of course, not among the polished front desk team or the sharply dressed concierge staff. No one spoke of them directly. No one admitted anything had happened at all. But the whispers had started. It began with a phone call the receptionist wasn't supposed to overhear. A regional investor inquiring about ownership transitions. Then a courier arrived with sealed documents marked confidential legal review. The general manager brushed it off with a casual flick of the wrist. Probably just a refinancing adjustment, he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Still, something was off. The head of housekeeping, an older woman who'd worked at the hotel for nearly 2 decades, leaned into the linen closet one morning and whispered to a junior maid, I heard a group from Ouagadougou is trying to buy the place. The girl blinked. Burkina Faso? She asked, confused. The older woman only shrugged. Money moves quietly. You never know these days. By that afternoon, it was all over the staff cafeteria. Half whispers traded over plastic trays of rice and stewed chicken. Was the hotel being sold? Would people lose their jobs? Who was behind it? The manager, meanwhile, remained completely at ease. He had poured himself a glass of imported white wine in his office and was reviewing the VIP guest list for next month's economic forum. When the assistant manager tentatively brought up the acquisition rumor, he waved it away with practiced confidence. Even if it were true, he said, do you honestly think they'd replace me? I am this hotel, my reputation, my network. No investor in their right mind would disrupt that. He leaned back in his leather chair, adjusting his cufflinks with a grin. If anything, they'll ask me to stay, maybe even give me a bigger role. But outside his office, not everyone was so relaxed, especially not Tamara. Ever since she had followed the couple out into the street, her fellow employees had looked at her differently. Some were subtle, a glance too long, a smile too tight. Others were more obvious. Still feeling noble, Tamara? A bellboy smirked as she passed by the elevators. Maybe you should start a charity for confused travelers. Another receptionist chimed in, half whisper, half joke. Careful, help too many poor people, and they might mistake you for one. Even in the break room where she once shared quiet lunches, Tamara now found herself eating alone more often. The ones who used to laugh with her now looked away. She didn't fight it. She didn't explain. She didn't try to justify what she had done, because deep down, Tamara knew something they didn't. That moment at the front steps of the hotel, that choice to speak up when everyone else stayed silent, had changed something inside her. She couldn't name it yet, but it felt like the beginning of something important. Something bigger than approval or popularity or fitting in with people who measured kindness by cost. And so, while the others whispered about what was happening to the hotel, Tamara said nothing, because she could feel it coming, not just change, but a reckoning. And when it arrived, The walls of the Gold Crest would remember who stood with dignity and who didn't. The next morning began like any other. Polished shoes clicking across marble floors, the scent of brewed coffee drifting through the air, staff adjusting uniforms in mirrored elevators. From the outside, the Gold Crest remained as pristine as ever. No cracks in the marble, no broken glass, no raised voices. But beneath the surface, something was stirring. At 7 a.m., a hotel courier wearing a charcoal gray jacket with no name tag entered the building. He moved quickly but silently, carrying a leather-bound folder and a stack of cream-colored envelopes. He didn't speak. He didn't linger. Within 20 minutes, he had disappeared. By 7:30, the first envelope appeared at the front desk. By 8 o'clock, every department head had received one. By 8:30, even the kitchen staff, the janitors, and the part-time valets had copies. The envelope was thick, with the Gold crest embossed in gold foil. No return address, no name, just a simple message printed on elegant cardstock. You are requested to report to the main lobby at 9 a.m. tomorrow for an urgent meeting regarding ownership and staffing changes. Attendance is mandatory. That was it. No signature, no explanation. Just a date, a time, and a message that rippled like a stone across a glassy lake. Whispers, once playful, now grew sharp. Ownership and staffing changes? Some guessed it was a buyout. Others insisted it was a merger. One porter in the service elevator swore he'd heard the hotel was closing down entirely and being turned into luxury condos. Another said he overheard someone in accounting mention that the buyer was foreign, Middle Eastern, maybe French. The manager, of course, refused to be shaken. He strolled through the lobby as if nothing had happened, the envelope tucked under one arm, unopened. When an assistant dared to ask about it, he waved it away. It's just a formality, he said smoothly. A new investor wants to introduce themselves, reassure the team. These things happen. And let's be honest, he added with a smirk, they'll be thanking me by the end of the day for keeping this place at the top. The staff around him chuckled nervously, but the laughter didn't reach their eyes, because no one knew what was coming. By mid-afternoon, tension wrapped itself around the hotel like a fog. Smiles became thinner, conversations became shorter. Even the usual background music in the lobby felt too loud, too artificial. The chandeliers sparkled above as always, but their shine now felt indifferent, almost mocking. Tamara received her envelope later than most. She found it on the folding table in the laundry corridor, wedged between a stack of clean towels and a broken steam iron. She turned it over twice before opening it, her hands trembling slightly. The paper felt heavier than it looked. She read the message once. Then again, her breath caught. Not out of fear, but because she knew something was changing. Not just in the hotel, but around her, through her. She looked around the room. No one else was there. The fluorescent light above her flickered once, humming faintly. The distant sound of dishes clattering in the kitchen echoed through the walls, but the corridor itself was still. Tamara folded the letter carefully and slid it back into the envelope. She held it in both hands, pressed against her chest for a moment, eyes closed. Part of her was afraid of being fired, of having spoken out when no one asked her to, of being seen as trouble in a place that valued silence. But another part, quiet, steady, unshakable, felt something else. Hope. Not hope for a promotion or recognition, not even for safety, but hope that maybe, just maybe, what she did that day on the hotel steps had meant something, that it had been noticed, that the world she wanted to believe in, a world where kindness was not a weakness, might actually be possible. At 9 a.m. tomorrow, everything would change. And tonight, the envelope in her hands held more than a message. It held a question. Would the world reward the silent ones or the brave? The grand chandelier above the Gold Crest Hotel lobby gleamed brighter than usual that morning. Everything seemed prepared for the unexpected, even though no one truly believed it was coming. It was exactly 8:59 a.m. when the first wave of staff began to gather, murmuring in clusters, adjusting ties, brushing lint from uniforms, rehearsing polite expressions as if they could mask the uncertainty crackling in the air. The manager stood near the concierge desk, spine straight, face composed, but his fingers tapped restlessly against his thigh. He hadn't admitted it out loud, but something inside him had shifted since receiving the envelope. Still, he reminded himself, this was his domain. He had built this place's image. Whoever the new owner was, they'd recognize that. They had to. Across the lobby, Tamara stood quietly behind a column, envelope still folded in her pocket. Her eyes scanned the room, noticing the tension in every posture, the forced smiles, the barely hidden panic beneath pressed collars and perfect lipstick. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not in the same way, but her heart beat fast. Then at precisely 9 a.m., the glass entrance doors opened, and everything stopped. A single pair of footsteps echoed against the marble. He entered wearing full military dress, sharp, decorated, clean lines, golden shoulder epaulets glinting beneath the chandelier light, polished boots clicking against the floor with each measured step. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to introduce himself. They all knew. President Ibrahim Traoré, the same man they had dismissed, laughed at, insulted. Only now, no one was laughing. The receptionist gasped audibly and dropped the tablet she was holding. It clattered against the counter and fell to the floor. The bellboy nearest the elevator took a step back, mouth slightly open. A waiter froze mid-pour, champagne spilling over the rim of a flute. Even the security guard near the guest elevators blinked hard, unsure whether to salute or hide. The manager's color drained from his face. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. President Traoré walked slowly into the center of the lobby, his presence impossibly calm, as if the weight of the uniform wasn't something he wore, but something he had always carried beneath his silence. His wife followed 2 steps behind, dressed with understated elegance. She didn't speak either. Her eyes simply scanned the room, remembering faces, measuring reactions. No one dared to move. The chatter had vanished. Even the background music had been turned off. For the first time since the hotel's grand opening, the lobby was completely, utterly silent. Traoré turned and faced the room. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it filled every corner of the space. 5 days ago, he said evenly, I walked through these doors, not as a president, not as a commander, not even as a guest of honor. I came here as a man, a husband, a traveler looking for rest. His gaze swept slowly across the lobby. Eyes dropped, back stiffened. And what I received was mockery, condescension, silence, from those trained to smile. Someone shifted near the back. The leather of a chair creaked, but no one dared interrupt. You judged me by the dust on my shoes, by the wear on my wife's suitcase, by the fact that I carried it myself. He paused. You judged, and you failed. He took another step forward. The sound of his boots was thunder compared to the breathless hush that followed. This hotel, he said, is no longer what it once was. He turned slightly, just enough for everyone to see the change in posture. As of yesterday, I am its new owner. The words didn't explode. They landed, like a stone dropped into deep water. Slow, heavy, inescapable. And with that, the lobby fell into something deeper than silence. It fell into reckoning. President Ibrahim Traoré stood at the heart of the lobby, the center of a silence so thick it felt almost sacred. Every eye was on him. Every breath was held. No one moved, not even the manager, who still stood frozen near the concierge desk, his carefully styled hair now damp with sweat along his temples. Traoré's voice, low but firm, echoed through the room with the clarity of truth. 5 days ago, I entered this hotel with my wife, asking for nothing but a place to rest. I wore no title. I brought no guards, no parade, just a suitcase and silence. He looked at the staff one by one, those behind the reception desk, those near the elevators, even the waiters and cleaners who had quietly gathered in the corners of the room. No accusation in his eyes, just the weight of observation. What I received was judgment. A pause. Not based on my character, not on my words, but on the shine of my shoes, the simplicity of my shirt, the skin on my face. Someone shifted uncomfortably. A receptionist looked down, biting her lip. The bellboy's hands fidgeted nervously behind his back. You saw a man without a name, Traoré continued, and you assumed he was beneath you. You saw humility and mistook it for weakness. You saw a lack of wealth and assumed a lack of worth. His tone did not rise. It did not need to. But worse than your assumptions was your laughter, your smirks, your whispered jokes. My wife, who has stood by me in war and in peace, was made to feel small in a place that calls itself grand. He turned slightly. A suited man stepped forward from behind him, carrying a thick leather folder embossed with a golden seal. Traoré took it and held it high enough for all to see. This, he said, is the official acquisition contract. He handed the folder to the assistant manager, whose hands trembled as she received it. As of yesterday, I am now the full owner of the Goldcrest Hotel. Gasps rippled through the lobby like wind through dry leaves. Eyes widened. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered quietly on the marble floor. The manager finally stepped forward, face pale, voice cracking. Mr. President, please. There must be some misunderstanding. Had we known? Traoré raised a gloved hand, stopping him cold. That, he said, eyes narrowing, is exactly the problem. You were only prepared to show respect if you knew who I was, but you should have shown it anyway, because I was a human being. Silence again, this time heavier. To those of you who turned us away, he said, scanning the room, who laughed at us, who made my wife feel unwelcome, who chose image over decency, you are dismissed, effective immediately. The room seemed to sway under the weight of those words. The manager's knees buckled slightly, his mouth opening to protest, but the security guard near the door had already stepped forward. No force was needed, only understanding. He was finished. Some staff covered their mouths, others closed their eyes. A few quietly nodded, knowing deep down this was coming, not just because of who the man was, but because of what they had become. President Traoré stood tall in the center of it all, not vindictive, not boastful, but resolute. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply said, let this hotel be a place where dignity lives, not behind gold letters or marble walls, but in every word spoken and every soul welcomed. And with that, the reckoning became real. As the final echo of the president's words settled over the lobby, a hush deeper than silence fell. It wasn't fear anymore. It was awe. A shift had occurred, not just in power, but in perception. People stood still, not because they were ordered to, but because they were witnessing something rare. Then President Traoré turned, slowly scanning the room once more, this time not in judgment, but in search. Tamara, he said. The name cut through the air like a bell. Tamara froze where she stood, tucked just beyond a support column near the laundry hallway. Heads turned, eyes widened. Staff who had once whispered behind her back now stared, stunned. She stepped forward, unsure whether to walk or run. Her feet moved on instinct, heart pounding. The space between her and the president seemed longer than the length of the lobby. When she reached him, she stood still, nervous, uncertain, hands folded in front of her, like a schoolgirl called to the front of a classroom. President Traoré looked at her, and for the first time that morning, his expression softened. You, he said gently, were the only one who saw me. Tamara tried to respond, but the words caught in her throat. You didn't know my name. You didn't know my title. You had no reason to help me, and yet, you did. He reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope, similar in design to the one sent out the day before, but thicker. He held it out to her with both hands. You led before you had a title, he said, loud enough for all to hear. Now you have one. Tamara's hands trembled as she accepted the envelope. Her eyes searched his face, as if to make sure she hadn't misheard. Open it, he said. She did, slowly, carefully. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper bearing the hotel's gold seal and a line in bold letters. Appointment, General Manager, Goldcrest Hotel. Effective immediately, her breath caught. The paper trembled in her hands. For a long moment, she just stared at it, the title blurring behind sudden, unexpected tears. The same girl who once carried towels and whispered apologies outside the front doors now stood in the very center of the hotel, being handed not just a title, but a legacy. I, I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything, Traoré said. You already said it when you stood up for someone who couldn't give you anything in return. Behind them, the staff stood in stunned silence. Some swallowed hard. Others lowered their gaze. A few clapped, tentatively at first, then stronger. Not out of obligation, but because deep down they knew this was right. Tamara turned toward the room, blinking back tears. The light from the chandelier above cast a warm glow across her face, catching on the thin line of moisture trailing down her cheek. She wasn't wearing designer heels. She had no expensive perfume. But in that moment, she stood taller than anyone else in the room. The message was clear. In a place built on prestige, she had risen not by power, but by principle. And that day, power bowed to character. The next morning, the staff of the Gold Crest Hotel gathered in the employee lounge. It was the same room where they had shared thousands of quiet breaks, whispered gossip, sipped coffee, and kept their heads down. But today, the atmosphere was different. The air felt charged, not tense, but alert, like something sacred was about to happen. They sat in rows, some on plastic chairs, others along the walls. No one knew exactly what to expect. Some had been silent during the upheaval, some had cheered, a few had cried after being dismissed, and now those who remained were left with a simple question: what happens next? Then Tamara entered. She wasn't wearing the blue blouse anymore. Gone were the worn shoes and utility belt. In their place was a simple, well-fitted blazer, modest earrings, and a gold name badge that simply read, Tamara Diabate, General Manager. But what struck everyone wasn't what she wore. It was how she carried herself. Tamara stood in front of her colleagues, not above them, not apart from them, just with them. Her voice when it came was soft, but it carried. I know many of you are wondering how I ended up here, she began. To be honest, I'm still wondering that too. A few small chuckles broke the tension. She smiled just slightly. But I do know this. I'm not here because of a title. I'm here because of a choice, one I made without knowing anyone was watching. She paused and took a breath. I didn't help that man because I knew he was the president. I helped him because he was tired, because he was treated like he didn't matter. And I know how that feels. Silence. Every face focused on her now. I grew up believing people saw you for your heart, but working here, I saw something else. I saw how fast we judge people by their shoes, by their accent, by whether they say please with the right tone or wear the right brand of cologne. She stepped closer to the front row. That ends today. No one moved. Some blinked faster than usual. A few crossed their arms, unsure. But no one looked away. Tamara turned and picked up a clipboard from the table behind her. On it was a single sheet of paper. She held it up. These are the new principles of the Gold Crest Hotel. They're simple, but they matter. She began reading. Number 1, we will treat every guest with equal dignity, whether they wear a gold watch or broken sandals. Number 2, we will not laugh at guests behind their backs or to their faces. No more smirks, no more whispers. Number 3, we will not judge a person's worth by their appearance, their clothes, or their accent. Number 4, we will help our teammates when they're overwhelmed. No more stepping over one another to impress a manager. Number 5, we will speak to one another and our guests with respect. Always. She paused again. And number 6, kindness is the new uniform. Wear it every day. No applause, not yet. Just a long moment where everyone absorbed the words. Then from the back row, a hand rose. It was the head of maintenance, a quiet man who rarely spoke in meetings. He stood up slowly. I've been here 13 years, he said, and I've never seen a manager say something like that. Tamara nodded. Then maybe we start something new today. Someone else clapped. Then another. And then the room was filled with hands coming together. Not loudly, not chaotically, but in rhythm, like a heartbeat beginning to return. Tamara didn't cry, but her throat tightened. She hadn't led with rules. She had led with truth. And now, for the first time, the Gold Crest Hotel was beginning to feel human, not perfect, but possible. 2 weeks after Tamara's appointment as general manager, something began to shift, not just in the mood of the hotel, but in the people who now walked through its service doors each morning. They were not dressed in polished black shoes or designer watches. Their resumes were not printed on fancy paper. Some didn't even have resumes at all. But their presence was unmistakable, real, humble, and honest. Tamara had opened the hotel's hiring doors wider than ever before, not for pity, not for publicity, but because she knew the truth. Some of the hardest working, most dignified people in the world had simply never been given a chance. One of the first was Musa. For years, Musa had stood at a traffic intersection just a few blocks from the hotel, selling bananas from a woven basket he carried on his head. He wore the same shirt every day, smiled at every passerby, and offered his fruit with soft-spoken patience, even when ignored, even when insulted. Tamara remembered him well. She used to pass him on her way home from the night shift. Once, she had stopped to buy a banana with the last coin in her pocket. He'd given her two instead. Now Musa stood in the grand dining hall of the Goldcrest Hotel, dressed in a neatly pressed server uniform. The first few days he had struggled to carry trays without wobbling, nervous under the heavy chandeliers and the quiet gazes of wealthy guests. But he learned, fast. Tamara had paired him with a veteran waiter who taught him how to move gracefully, how to time courses, how to read a table without speaking. Within a week, guests were asking for Musa by name. He didn't say much, but every time someone thanked him, he bowed slightly and said, "I used to serve bananas in the street. Now I serve joy at your table." Then came Isatu. She arrived at the hotel one hot afternoon, clutching a small child by the hand and a tattered plastic bag under her arm. Her eyes were tired, her clothes worn. She hadn't come looking for a job, only a moment to sit in the shade, maybe a glass of water. Tamara found her on the back patio, gently rocking her daughter to sleep on a bench. Instead of asking her to leave, Tamara brought her tea, then food. They talked. Isatu had once worked in a laundry center before her husband disappeared and her rent vanished with him. She'd spent the last 2 years surviving on odd jobs, sleeping in abandoned buildings or church basements when she could. The next morning, she was hired. Today, Isatu runs the hotel's laundry department. She arrives before sunrise. Her daughter enrolled in a nearby school thanks to a hotel-sponsored scholarship. She has her own locker, a crisp uniform, and a small corner office with a handwritten sign on the door. Laundry Supervisor, Isatu Ba. The staff respects her not because of her title, but because of her story, and how hard she works to rewrite it every day. Tamara never announced these hirings in meetings. She didn't post about them on social media. She simply did what good leaders do. She saw people, people with names, people with history, people who had been forgotten not because they were unworthy, but because the world had never taken the time to listen. And now in the halls of a once cold hotel, their voices and footsteps filled the air, not as background noise, but as proof that when dignity opens its doors, it leaves no one behind. By the end of the month, something unspoken had settled into the walls of the Goldcrest Hotel. It wasn't part of the decor or a memo from upper management. It didn't shine like the chandeliers or click like high heels on marble, but it was felt in smiles and softened voices, in how people looked at one another. For the first time in its long, glittering history, the hotel began to breathe like a living thing. And at its center was Tamara. Each morning she walked through the lobby, not with urgency, but with presence. She paused to greet the receptionist, not just with a nod, but by name. "Good morning, Samuel. How was your sister's wedding?" she asked one day, surprising the young man so much he nearly forgot to check in a guest. In the kitchen, she didn't just demand cleaner counters or faster service. She tasted the food. She asked how the new oven was working. She made time to shake hands with the dishwasher, an older man named Joseph, who had worked there for years without anyone ever asking his name. "You're part of this too," she told him. "Every plate you clean helps someone feel at home." At the security checkpoint by the side entrance, she stopped beside Fatu, one of the guards who'd often been invisible to past managers. "You do so much for us," Tamara said warmly, "but who's checking on you?" Fatu had blinked in surprise, then smiled. "Today? You are, Madame Tamara." "Not Madame," she corrected. just Tamara. Across departments, subtle changes took root. Staff who once nodded silently in hallways began offering real greetings. Good morning, Awa. Need help with that, Kofi? They learned each other's names, not just to fill out schedules, but to see each other as people. Old rivalries faded. One afternoon, the head of housekeeping helped the front desk resolve a last-minute room conflict. No grumbling, no complaints. Just a quiet, we're on the same team now. The maintenance crew began arriving 10 minutes early, not because they feared punishment, but because they wanted to be part of something that finally felt worth showing up for. There were no bonuses promised, no flashy incentives, just the promise of respect and the gentle leadership of a woman who never raised her voice, but whose expectations were felt in every hallway. Kindness was no longer a slogan. It had become the default. Guests noticed too. They began leaving thank you notes, not just for the concierge, but for the bellboys and breakfast staff. Some even asked to meet the manager with a smile, curious about the woman they'd heard about in hushed admiration. And while the floors still shined and the chandeliers still sparkled, the hotel's true glow came from something else now. Something warmer, something real. It no longer felt like a museum for the elite. It felt like a home. And for the first time in a long time, everyone inside believed they belonged. The afternoon sun poured softly through the lobby's tall windows, casting golden streaks across the marble floor. The day had been calm. A few business travelers lounged in the cafe. Housekeeping was running on schedule. The front desk had just checked in a family of 4. Then the glass doors opened again. At first, no one noticed. The woman who stepped in didn't belong to the world of silk scarves and leather suitcases. Her clothes were faded and torn at the edges. Dust clung to her sandals, her skin sunburned and tired. She held an old canvas bag tightly to her chest, as if afraid someone might take it, or as if it held the last pieces of her dignity. She hesitated just past the entrance, eyes scanning the polished room. Her posture was cautious, not from guilt, but from experience. The kind learned through 100 rejections. A few heads turned. One guest frowned. A young receptionist glanced uncertainly toward the security desk. The woman stepped forward only a few meters, then stopped. I'm not a guest, she said softly. Her voice cracked, dry as paper. I just wanted to sit, for a moment, just to rest. Her words floated across the lobby like a whisper. No one moved. The staff looked at each other, unsure what to do. Then Tamara entered. She had just come from a staff meeting in the back when she saw the woman. Without hesitation, she walked straight across the room, her heels quiet on the marble. Hello, she said gently. Are you okay? The woman looked startled, then ashamed. I'm sorry, I'm not here to beg. I'm not here to cause trouble. My legs were shaking. I thought maybe just a minute on that bench. Tamara nodded. You're welcome to sit, she said, offering her hand. Would you like some water? The woman blinked, then tears welled in her eyes. Yes, please. Tamara led her to a small seating area near the side window, then asked the cafe to bring water and a piece of bread. She sat beside the woman, asked her name, and listened. Her name was Yama. She had worked in kitchens before, hotels, restaurants, wedding venues, but after losing her husband and her home, she had struggled to find stable work. She hadn't eaten a full meal in 2 days. Tamara stood, walked to the kitchen, and returned with a small apron folded in her hand. I spoke to our chef, she said with a quiet smile. He could use an extra pair of hands tonight, just part-time for now, but it comes with a warm meal and a place to rest. Yama stared at her, speechless. Then slowly she took the apron. That night, as laughter and cutlery filled the dining hall, Yama stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes with quiet focus, a clean apron tied around her waist, and tears in her eyes. She hadn't come to check in, but she had finally arrived somewhere she belonged. A few days later, the lobby of the Goldcrest Hotel was quieter than usual. Not silent, but reverent. Something new had appeared at the front of the hotel, right beside the entrance doors framed in polished brass. 2 golden plaques, newly mounted on the white marble wall, caught the morning light. The first read, Owned by President Ibrahim Traoré, a man never too big to be treated small, and beside it, in matching gold letters, Managed by Tamara Diabate, a woman who led with kindness before she had power. There was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no press conference, just the sound of luggage wheels rolling past, coffee cups clinking in the cafe, and the gentle rustle of lives continuing. But the plaques spoke louder than announcements ever could. Guests began to stop in front of them. Some took photos. Others paused in silence, as if standing before something sacred. A few reached out and touched the smooth surface, their fingers lingering as if to feel the truth behind the words. One woman, a traveler from Ghana, stood there with tears in her eyes. "My daughter needs to read this," she whispered to the concierge. This is the kind of story she needs to believe in." Within weeks, young stories of the hotel's transformation spread far beyond Abidjan. Tourists didn't just come for the five-star sheets or rooftop dining. They came to feel something, to witness a place where dignity wasn't a luxury and kindness wasn't a footnote. Some came just to sit in the lobby, hoping to catch a glimpse of Tamara as she passed, clipboard in hand, still stopping to ask staff how their families were. Others asked about the president's visit, wanting to hear from the doormen or receptionists who had witnessed the day history quietly walked through glass doors. But more than that, something deeper lingered. The walls of the Gold Crest had once echoed with judgment, pride, and status. Now they remembered something else, something worth more than stars or gold. That the way we treat people when we think they are nobody is the truest reflection of who we really are. And the hotel had finally become more than a place to stay. It had become a place to remember. Several months had passed. The rains had come and gone. The rhythm of the hotel had settled into something steady, something good. Stories continued to travel far and wide, of second chances, of warm welcomes, of a young woman who led not with fear, but with grace. And then, one ordinary morning, the glass doors slid open again. There was no entourage, no press, no announcement. Just a man in a plain white shirt, dark trousers, and worn leather shoes. He carried a small bag, slung over one shoulder. His steps were calm, almost silent. Some staff looked up instinctively, then looked again. It was him. Tamara was speaking with the kitchen team when she caught the movement from the corner of her eye. She turned, heart-catching for just a moment, not from nerves but recognition. She excused herself, walking toward the lobby, her smile already forming. He stood near the corner chair, not at the center, not seeking attention. She approached slowly. "Welcome back, sir," she said softly, stopping a step away. Traoré looked up and smiled. "I wanted to see it, as a guest." "You'll always be welcome here," Tamara replied, voice warm. "Here, we see the person, not the position." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people who had once stood in that very lobby as strangers, bound only by kindness. He extended his hand. She took it, firm and steady. No bowing, no ceremony, no title needed, just respect. And in that quiet gesture, the journey that began with humiliation had ended with something far greater: understanding. Word of what happened at the Goldcrest Hotel spread far beyond Abidjan. It started with whispers, then news reports, then full-feature articles across Africa. Soon the story reached international headlines. A president humbled, a hotel transformed, a manager who led with kindness. But it wasn't just a headline. Other hotels began sending staff to visit Goldcrest, not just for training and hospitality, but for something deeper. A new model emerged, luxury not built on prestige, but on dignity. Goldcrest became the first hotel in Africa to formally train employees in both service and character. Every new hire learned practical skills, yes, but also how to look a guest in the eye, call them by name, and treat the janitor like a CEO. They called it the human standard. And Tamara, she didn't aim to be famous, but her quiet leadership became a beacon. Guests began to return, not for the thread count or the rooftop view, but for something they couldn't always describe. They said things like, "The receptionist remembered my name. The waiter noticed I was tired and brought me tea," without being asked. It felt like they saw me. In interviews, Tamara was asked over and over how she got to where she was. She always gave the same answer: "I respected someone when others didn't." And that respect opened a door I never knew existed. The world called her a leader, but she never called herself anything other than someone trying to do the right thing, even when no one was looking. As the story draws to a close, a voice returns, gentle but clear. You don't need a title to lead, you just need the courage to be kind, even when no one is watching. The camera pans over the hotel at night, soft lights glowing, quiet music playing. Inside, a cleaner hums a song while wiping down a table. At the front desk, a young man greets an elderly couple by name. In the kitchen, Yama laughs beside the head chef. Outside, mounted by the entrance, a single sign glows beneath the lights. Kindness is the best uniform. And in that quiet truth, the story lives on. This story reminds me that true power is quiet. President Traoré could have responded with anger, yet he chose a patient, values-driven solution, buying the very space that rejected him and turning it into a beacon of dignity. Tomorrow's rise affirms that leadership begins the moment we treat a stranger with respect, not when a badge appears on our chest. Goldcrest's transformation, from marble walls that judge to living halls that welcome, proves institutions change only when people within them change first. We often celebrate grand gestures, but here the decisive moments were soft. An apology whispered on a sidewalk, a glass of water offered without expectation. Those small acts became the hinges on which an entire culture turned. If kindness can flip a five-star hotel on its head, imagine what it could do in our offices, classrooms, or homes. Question for you. When was the last time a simple act of respect changed your day? And how might you pass that spark forward tomorrow? If this story touched you, don't let it stop here. Like, share, and subscribe to Captain of Truth, where every voice matters and every story echoes far beyond the screen. This story is a fictionalized and dramatized narrative created for educational, inspirational, and storytelling purposes. While it may be inspired by real public events, people, or societal issues, it includes imagined dialogue, reconstructed scenes, and character interpretations meant to highlight broader themes of justice, dignity, and resilience. Any resemblance to actual events or individuals beyond public knowledge is purely coincidental. We do not intend to defame, mislead, or harm, but to invite reflection and meaningful conversation. Thank you for watching Captain of Truth.